Donald Trump has a history of making inflammatory statements, and that would have killed the political career of almost anyone else. But his insinuation that President Barack Obama had a secret agenda that linked him to the events that took place in Orlando appears to have cost him support. Earlier this week, Trump told a radio host that, quote, "We're led by a man that either is not tough, not smart, or he's got something else in mind. There's something going on. It's inconceivable. There's something going on." We should probably add ... after that. For Republicans, the comments threw a wrench in their efforts to get behind Trump, just as Hillary Clinton is finding her footing and beginning to make peace with Bernie Sanders. Our U.S. political panel is here to weigh in on the latest developments. Paul Brandis of West Wing Reports is in New York this week. Louisa Savage of Politico is in our Washington studio. Thank you both for joining us. So let's begin with you, Paul. And you have long argued that Trump would implode, and you've been in good company. Others who, like David Brooks, I think, of the New York Times and others, maybe some saying you might have been proven wrong. Now, maybe are you being proven right? What do you think of all this?
Well, when Trump says that something's going on, John, I think what that something is Trump kind of just going off the deep end here. I mean, even these comments that he made insinuating something nefarious that the president was up to with regard to these Orlando shootings and this closet support for ISIS and all of that, those comments were so incendiary that even these Republicans who still claim that they support him, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, I mean, they're in a really tough spot. I mean, they're placing as much distance between him as they can without outright walking back their endorsement completely. What a tough position for them to be in. And all of this is occurring, by the way, as the Democrats are finally beginning to come together. I mean, the president, of course, has now endorsed Mrs. Clinton, Vice President Biden, of course, Elizabeth Warren, possibly a vice presidential candidate, and Bernie Sanders, for all intents and purposes, has stopped campaigning, and they met this week for about an hour and a half. So the circling of the wagons on the Democratic side is happening while Trump continues to put his foot in the mouth. He had a really bad week, and that is reflected, in fact, in these polling numbers, which show that Clinton has regained a bit of an edge over him.
Yeah, as you were saying, Paul, essentially they've given the scent to the dogs and they've unleashed the surrogates on this campaign now. So, Louisa, you from Politico. Politico had a page up this past week, and it really it was worth checking out for anyone, just having a read through, and you have a look at it. It refers to Trump having fallen into a historic hole, and using words like a new modern record in political toxicity. Damning there. What do you think of his latest poll numbers?
Well, I think there are two things that are striking about the latest poll number. First, as you say, he has unprecedented levels of unfavorable ratings. People who just think they don't like him, they're against him, they have a negative position, negative view of him. He's reached around 70%, depending on which poll you look at, and that's just unprecedented in the history of presidential polling. Hillary Clinton is also upside down, but it's only slightly more than half of people have a negative view of her. And the problem for Trump is a lot of these people have a very strongly negative view of him, which pollsters say means it's going to be very, very hard to change their minds. The second striking thing that we saw in the polling this week, Politico and American University came out with polling in the battleground states, 11 states. And we found that in all those battleground states that are going to determine the outcome of this election, the swing states, Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump in all of them. And her lead is between 1% in some places and double digits in others. So that should be very worrying to him. And she's about to unleash some $24 million in ads in those battleground states, which should cement that difference even further. But the only caveat I'd add is there was a new poll that came out from Reuters on Friday that suggested that perhaps some of the gap between Hillary and Trump has closed since the Orlando shootings. So I think we have to be careful and get some more recent polling that has been conducted after the shooting, just to be sure how this is really playing out with the electorate. But he's starting out with a really, really deep hole to climb out of.
It's quite remarkable. And, politics, we talk about words like broad and deep support, usually followed, the words broad and deep connected with support. But now we're talking about broad and deep unfavorability, arguably, with both these candidates. So, Paul, let's try and look more into the minds of the Republican leadership. He's their guy. What is going on behind the scenes there in terms of trying to develop a strategy to either win the election or come out with a party when the election's all over with?
Well, I think at this point, it's almost every man for himself. There are a lot of Republicans who they won't say so publicly, but they have essentially written off the presidential race, the electoral college, demographics, the negative numbers that Louisa just cited. All of that put together is a really toxic brew at the presidential level. So I think what a lot of Republicans are now doing, John, is they are beginning to focus on doing what they can to salvage the Senate, which is also in jeopardy because of Trump. And there's even talk, I don't place a lot of credence in this at this point, but there's even talk that the House itself, where the Republicans have a huge majority, even that possibly could be in jeopardy. So what we're seeing is a lot of Republicans are kind of shifting away from the presidential level, and whatever fundraising they are doing, they are not funneling it towards Trump in any way. They're doing all they can to shore up Senate and House races. And that includes, by the way, former President George W. Bush. The Bush family, as you know, wants absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump, but the Bushes are now doing what they can to help salvage some of these Senate races. So I think there's a clear wedge in the Republican Party between the presidential level and what's going on in the so-called down ballot races in the Senate and House races.
So, Louisa, what's your take on the machinations of the Republicans in these days?
Well, I would say the main word right now is distrust. This is usually a time in the campaign cycle where the candidate and the national party come together and work together for a common cause. They plan the convention, they put their money together, their fundraising lists, their voter lists, all this kind of seamless work that now has to happen between now and November. It's not happening very seamlessly. You have the parties second-guessing the candidate. Officials within the RNC feel that their advice is not being taken. Meanwhile, Trump feels that the Trump campaign feels that they're not working together. They're not working in Trump's interest. They don't feel the need to take advice because they think that Trump, by being brash, by being himself, that's how he won the primaries, and that's how he's going to continue. So they don't really want advice on what kinds of comments he should be making. And so you hear this behind-the-scenes chatter that, the Trump campaign fires someone, and the next day the RNC hires that person, and that seemed seen as a slap in the face. So this is a really tense time between the two sides. And as Paul mentioned, you have leading Republicans coming out and saying, critical things about what Donald Trump has said in the wake of Orlando and even before that. So this tension and distress that's been going on is not helping either side, either not helping them hold the Congress and not helping Trump win the presidency.
Well, Paul, of course, Trump has led on his own from the very beginning, putting key family members in position, saying that he was raising his own money. Of course, he's raising money elsewhere now, too. But is he going to just go it alone? And should he be going it alone if you were advising him politically?
Well, he seems to think that the primary campaign is the same as the general election campaign, and they are like Mars and Venus, as they say. He simply does not understand that. And in terms of, here's the way things look for the Trump campaign at this point. They're way behind Clinton in terms of organization, in terms of staffing, and using data analytics to target the voters that they need. They're way behind in money, too. They had to issue, excuse me, just yesterday, they had to issue an emergency alert, as they called it, for just $100,000. $100,000 in U.S. That doesn't go exactly very far in a campaign where you have to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. So they do not have anywhere near the kind of cash that they have. And yet Trump does not want to listen to the party leadership. Again, he got where he was by being brash, by being outspoken, by saying these incendiary things. He turned 70 years old this week. It's hard for him to actually turn over a new leaf and become the kind of person that they want him to be. So the bottom line here, in terms of organization, staffing, money, data analytics, he's way behind the Democrats. So I think he's in a really tough spot. But if you talk to him, he says, oh, we're in great shape, we're going to win. I just don't know what he bases that on at this point.
Folks, we just got about a minute left. I'm going to ask you each about what effect you think Orlando and the reigniting of the gun control debate might have on this campaign. Louisa, let's start with you.
Well, I think there are a lot of people who were incredibly uncomfortable with Donald Trump's response. And so what we're hearing at Politico, we had a story that there are dozens of delegates to the Republican convention that feel they should be unbound from their voting results and responsibility to vote for Trump, and they want to vote their conscience. Trump dismisses this as a media conspiracy, but I think this discomfort is not limited to Washington leaders, but it's out there in the country among his delegates. That doesn't mean there's someone else who will come out the nominee from this convention, but it means that there's going to be a lot of turmoil because people are just not comfortable with his response.
Guys, I'm going to have to stop you there. Terrific discussion. We're going to hear about this man and these issues again in the coming weeks. Thank you so much. Paul Brandis of the West Wing Reports in New York and Louisa Savage of Politico in our Washington Bureau.
Thanks a lot.